Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Constanze Frischen. I'm Ashoka's leader in North America, and I am joined today by Laura Sommer, dialing in from Buenos Aires. Hello, Laura. Thank you.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for being with us today. You are the CEO of FactChequeado and the co-founder of FactChequeado. And we'll be diving into a fascinating conversation today about details of your work, your observation around disinformation in Spanish, what we can do to combat it, why we cannot get rid of it by technology alone, and more. And before we start, everyone, the way it's going to work now is Laura and I will be having a conversation for the first 15-20 minutes, and then we open up the room for a Q&A. You can see a little chat box on the bottom of your screen. That's where you can type in your questions, and then we're going to address them as we move along. All right, let's get started. Laura, starting with you. You are a lawyer, you're an award-winning journalist, and you're also the pioneer of fact-checking in Latin America. The NGO you founded, FactChequeado, you work across 17 countries, across the continent. It's a dynamic network of journalists, technologists, students that quickly work to fact check information and do much more. And so let us start with setting the context. What is it that the audience should know about how disinformation works?
Yeah, we started working with FactChequeado 12 years ago, where the disinformation phenomenon were not necessary in the agenda. And what we saw at that time is that people need better information to take their own decisions and to not necessarily follow what someone that prepare a good campaign in social networks try to convince or something like that. And at the beginning, our focus were fact checks politicians or social leaders or businessmen or media. Mm-hmm. And what happened 6 years ago is that we discovered that there were some days where everyone were talking about topics or issues that no one knows who started them. And that's the moment where we realized that something different related to lies or propaganda campaigns were changing, because they were not transparent at all, related to some bad actors that generates content and conversations that are appealing, but they are not necessarily factual or evidence-based.
Can you give us an example?
Yeah, of course. There's a lot of examples related to issues that are preparing the place for, I'm going to give you an example from Brazil that perhaps the Americans can find similar, because they are similar, because this information is a global problem and have some similar characteristics all over the world. 1 year or so before the last election in Brazil, the former president, Jair Bolsonaro, started to criticize the electoral system, saying something like it's not necessarily accountable enough, or we gonna have problems in this town or in that state, or etc.
How famously in the US, Trump said, the system is rigged.
Yeah, but they start with the narrative
way earlier.
Yeah, earlier. And what happened with that? You saw the content, you start to see the narrative. You don't necessarily believe on that, perhaps at the beginning, but when the campaign or the propaganda campaign created for these actors and confirm something that you already saw dozens or thousands of times, and in some cases you followed that and you said, okay, this confirmed what I saw and someone told me about it. And the same happened with all the anti-vaccines movement, for example, or the people that deny the pandemic.
But it's like that you prepare the ground by seeding mistrust, and then you see one event and you pick it up and say, see, that confirmed what I said before.
Exactly. And the problem or the challenge with that is that obviously what we are doing with the fact-checking movement, when we start, there were just 7 organizations all around the world, in the States, in France, UK, and Argentina. We were the first in the South. And now we are more than 300 organizations, and 80 organizations are already certified by the International Fact-Checking Network. We pass an exam every year related to a code of principles that we have. We fact check and we focus on the facts. And part of the problem with disinformation is that it's more than just facts. There are emotions there. There are non-transparent algorithms from technology working there and contributing to the problem. And then we always repeat that part of the challenge or the necessary that we have is that we need to find solutions that are not just one. It's not that we're going to create a chatbot that's going to solve the problem. It's not just a technology issue. It's not just a journalistic solution. It should be education, cultural, technology, journalistic, much more holistic. And that's related to part of what Ashoka is all the time trying to help us understand better as fellows. And our work from FactChequeado try to always build networks that are not just journalistic networks. In some cases, we work with teachers or with companies helping us to have quicker answers to the content or to spread our content more. Then we know that this information gonna be there for sure, and each day is more complex to tackle it. Then what we need to have is better solutions to address the problem in a better way.
Yeah. When in our conversation to prep for this, we talked about, you mentioned the importance of trust. And you mentioned that in the context of that, for instance, here in the US, where you are starting together with another Ashoka fellow, Clara Jimenez, you're starting to work here because there are 60 million Spanish-speaking people in the US that consume news in Spanish. So you were talking about trust, that, for instance, your target group doesn't necessarily read the Washington Post or the New York Times because they don't feel these institutions portray them adequately or know enough about their context. So they're consuming news differently. So can you give us a little bit of lay of the land in terms of what should we know about media consumption at the stage of, in the Spanish-speaking context in the US to understand your intervention?
Yeah, of course. Part of what we learn in our context in Latin America, and Clara Jimenez with Maldita in Spain, is that in some cases, Latino population are not necessarily consuming the media or consuming information in the same way that an average American. And one of the reasons is there's a lot of content circulating in an app that is called WhatsApp, that is a meta company like Instagram or Facebook, that allowed people that live outside or abroad their country to continue being in contact with their friends and families for free. Because WhatsApps allowed you messages free, 24 hours, 7 days. You can share texts or videos or audios with no charge. And that, for lots of people, it's something really different from an SMS. In our countries, SMS is expensive for some people. Then one of the focus of FactChequeado, that is the project that we launched last April in the US, is we need to be in the platforms and the places where the Latino population are already consuming content. If we are not in the place where they are, we are losing them. And that applies not just for WhatsApp, also for some research show us that Latino population in the States consume a lot of content in YouTube and also in other platforms like Instagram or TikTok. Then we need to create a media that is not necessarily just focused on create evidence-based content in text, because the texts are necessary but not enough to address this population.
Before I ask you to walk us a little bit through how you do this fact checking, I want to talk about one other phenomenon that you brought up in our fact check, that there is in our pre-conversation, that there is the whole, range of disinformation that is ideological in nature. This is my political opinion, and so on and so on and so on. And then there is a whole different field that is basically about making money.
Exactly.
And you had this example, for instance, after
abortion.
Yeah,
Roe versus Wade. Yeah, for
Tell
sure.
us a bit about that.
I'm gonna recap just a bit related to trust that you asked me before. What we saw in some research related to Latino communities in the States is that Latinos don't necessarily feel represented in most of the well-known media in the States. And part of our learning in our countries is that this is not a problem just in the US or some groups in the US. It's a problem that you need to address, making a kind of one-to-one relationship with that people. And then what we are trying to build with FactChequeado is we have a chatbot where people can ask us questions or resend us a picture they received saying, is this true? Or this is a manipulated image or content. And we do that because we need to build a community that can help us to spread the fact checks or the truth or the factual information when the disinformation starts to circulate. And then related to trust is our strategy is to listen more and to have a conversation with that people, asking them what you are worried about, what is important for you, and not necessarily working with the old-fashioned agenda of journalists saying, these are the topics in the red carpet, and these are the important topics, and the rest I don't care because they are not necessarily enough for us to report on them. We need to have that two conversation, the citizens conversation and the media conversation more aligned to recover the trust. And that's related to trust. And then I can follow on what you asked.
Yeah, just a follow-up question on that one. So because to do that, you're building networks, right? That are very close to where people are. Who is part of your network, to just give people an idea?
What we saw in our countries and in the US, that is an enormous country there's not one Latino profile. There's dozens or perhaps hundreds of different Latinos. They are not the same, the Mexican living in Texas or the Puerto Rican in New York, or someone that moved to US to do a master, or someone that is working 10 hours a day and just arrived at home to have a bit of fun in some social networks. Then what we are trying to do is to build a network with different media that are producing content in Spanish, or some media that are bilingual. And nowadays we have 37 partners in 15 states already, plus Puerto Rico, that help us to bring to our newsroom meeting every Thursday the topics or the issues or the conversations they saw on their own cities or towns or chat groups or etc. Then we have partners as big media as El Detector from Univision or PolitiFact or FactCheck.org that are well-known fact checkers. But also we have small media, Enlace Latino from North Carolina, that have just 2 reporters, or La Esquina from Kentucky, that just 1. And we are trying to build that network because we need to know more about that different communities to prepare debunks, but also explainers related to the issues they are worried or they need to know better. And you asked me about why this information is so viral in some cases. Because there are people in lots of cases trying to gain or power or money. And the example related to abortion is we saw the same narratives after Roe versus Wade in the US that some years ago we saw in Argentina when the Congress passed the abortion law, or in Colombia where they discussed the topic. And I mentioned that when we talk about abortion, obviously we see a lot of conservative messages or people that are religious explaining things that are not necessarily evidence-based in terms of health policy or etc. But we also see a lot of content for people trying to make money with that, using that narrative or that momentum to make money. An example that we saw super viral in the US accounts in TikTok after the week after the Roe versus Wade decision was people that were selling herbs, medicines to practice an abortion, saying you don't need necessarily to go to a place where they are not necessarily going to give you an abortion. You can just buy this and practice by your own. And obviously that's super dangerous, but also there were people making money.
Not the same with COVID, right? So people selling pills and whatever homemade stuff, saying that it's an effective medication.
Yeah, and I think it's important when you approach this information is to have both ideas on your mind. There's bad actors trying to be more powerful, but other actors just trying to make money. And today they can be disinformers about the COVID pandemic, and 2 months after about Ukraine war. And we saw that. There's Telegram groups in Telegram that just changed the subject of the group. And during the pandemic, they were anti-vaccines groups, and now they were anti-Ukraine government or something like that. And they move to the place where they can earn more money in some cases. And obviously it's important to identify them, but it's not easy because the platforms in some ways make it difficult because you don't have transparent about lots of accounts on lots of ads that are publishing content or putting content there.
Yeah, super fascinating. We want to open our Q&A soon, so folks can start dropping their questions in. And in the meantime, another question to you, Laura. What is giving you hope? Like, where are instances where you're saying, okay, this is moving, or this is a positive sign?
I always repeat something that makes me feel proud about it is in Argentina, when a politician or a businessman or a social leader said something, for example, a statement that says Argentina has less poverty than Germany. And obviously, no, we have much more poverty in Argentina than in Germany. And what started to happen is that in the same moment that the minister said that, there were people saying, is this already checked? Please, FactChequeado, you did it. I need to know more about it. And they were citizen answers to that type of big lies. I'm not saying that we are in the situation of saying, okay, our work is done, everyone knows about disinformation in the country. Not at all. What I'm saying is that we create much more awareness than some years ago related to the problem, and we also create more awareness related what you can do to at least not to contribute to make the disinformation be more easy for the bad actors. We made some campaigns asking people, okay, if you don't know the source, don't share the content. Don't use that idea as I share it just in case. No, just in case, don't share it. It's exactly the opposite, or something like that. And on the other side, it's not enough what platforms are doing now, and we are really critics about big techs and their programs related to disinformation, but at least they recognize they are a main actor in this problem. 5 years ago, they just say we are not part of the problem. People are free to say what they want.
Whatever they want.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating what you just said, because the first thing illustrates really what you said before, that this is a problem that cannot be solved by technology alone, but requires like a mindset shift, right? That people start being aware that these things happen and that you don't take information at face value, and that you start, holding power accountable or money accountable by saying, hey, is this correct or not?
Yeah.
So really interesting. There is one question directly related to what you said in the end about the big social media platforms. One listener is asking, what is the difference between the disinformation landscape in the English language and the Spanish speaking language?
Yeah, I always repeat that disinformation is a global problem, but in general in the South, and this applied to Spanish-speaking communities in the US, being in the North, but in some cases being as the South, is that no one cares enough about disinformation that is not English disinformation. They don't spend the same money to track it. They don't have necessary people that can even realize about what the keywords are related to disinformation narratives or campaigns. In some cases, there are tools that allowed us to develop, for example, AI tools that are not good enough in Spanish or non-English languages. For example, something really easy to understand is some years ago, we needed transcriptors of videos to, if you have a video of 20 minutes and you need to fact check that, you need a transcriptor to do it quicker and not necessarily being all the time listen to interviews or programs, etc. And that tools in English were excellent, and in Spanish they were really bad. And we are all the time, and part of the strategic and political idea of launching FactChequeado in the US is to put on the agenda that the non-English disinformation, it's a huge problem in countries that needs a lot of policies related to this, because in some countries they are not even. I know that after Trump, US have some problems with the system, but obviously you know that the world has a lot of institutional challenges that are not necessarily what you have, that you have at least a Supreme Court independent or different powers that are balanced, etc. Then we always repeat that we need to know much more about this information that is not English disinformation. We need to invest more on research, academic research, to know more about this, to have better evidence, also to develop new solutions of technology, because there's almost nothing related to Latino communities in the States and disinformation. All of what we have is disinformation in English. Then part of our goal is to contribute to that, to create a database that academics can analyze and have a better idea about what are the main challenges related to disinformation and Latino communities in the States.
Yeah, thank you. Here is another really interesting question, and that is the role of young people, of digital natives, in engaging to protect facts and combat online information. Are you seeing, what are you seing there? And are there any indications that give you hope?
Yeah, when we start working on this field, they were some years ago, this idea that the younger people were worst identifying this information than the older. Some research, not in Spanish, but in English, show that senior people that are not necessarily native in social networks have more problems, not just because they are not used to how to use Photoshop or other tools that allow you, or filters that allow you to prepare a story that is not a real or factual story, but also because if you are older, you have more bias and more prejudice, and you are not necessarily as open to recognize that. And then part of what we are seeing is that the younger generation are more open to recognize that they were wrong, or they can recognize, I made a mistake, I can correct, and that gives hope. But I'm not saying all of the young people are already aware or in the page that we want to be related to that. There's other young people that just spend hours and hours following what the YouTube algorithms suggest them, and in some cases start to believe all that content, and perhaps there are conspiracy theories or something like that. And then there's a lot of work to do on that.
There is another question here. Can you describe the different patterns you're seeing related to different platforms? So I think the question is there something that you see that is peculiar about YouTube and something else that is special about TikTok? And can you talk a bit about that?
What we are seeing is we don't have enough content. In these months, we create more or less 400 articles, explainers, and debunks, and then we need to have more content to have a stronger answer for this question. But part of what we saw is TikTok has a lot of challenge. Perhaps if you have a TikTok account, you know about that. And one of the biggest problems is that some challenge includes, in some cases, medicines. And then the last one is related to, it's a challenge of asking Mexican younger people to not sleep at all. And they ask us to take some medicine to stay with awake. And that's a huge problem. And we are not necessarily seeing that on YouTube, because YouTube has stronger, non-transparent, but stronger policies related to content that are medicine or health content.
Thank you so much. And then I have one more question, and then we need to wrap up. And that is a question to how your organization gets funded. What is the funding model for this work? Who is willing to pay for that?
Yeah, it's an interesting, and I'm also, this is part of our distinction between different media and organization in the region. Is from the beginning, after we create the organization, we look no one to give us a lot of money, but lots of people to give us small amounts. And we developed that model to have independent or autonomy in terms of editorial autonomy, and not to be dependent from someone that one day told us, okay, I'm not interested in this issue anymore, and then you're gonna stop. Then our model includes, we have international cooperation grants, and that in some cases give us money also as a core grant to develop the organization. Nowadays, we are 40 people working full-time in the organization. That is huge for Latin America non-for-profit media. We also have funds from a kind of gala event that we do once a year, and companies give us money, and we are transparent about them in our website, and that night we recognize them, and it's a networking event where we invite journalists from really different media, not just in terms of TV or graphic or radio, but also in terms of editorial. It's like you put together pro-government or non-government editorial media in the same place, discussing or having a good time. Also, we have crowdfunding campaigns and support from citizens that contribute to us because they feel that having better information can contribute to democracy and to improve the quality of public debate, and they are worried about our mission. And we also have some funds from what we call our own activities that are or trainings or contents that we create for other media, and we decide to have an income related to that. We are non-for-profit, but if you are a media that are private media republishing our content, and this is not one shot, it's regularly, we ask you to pay us to do that.
Thank you so much, Laura, for giving us this detailed insight into your work and into the universe of disinformation in Spanish. Thank you so much for all you do. Thanks everyone for joining and chiming in, and we see you all again next week. And thank you, Laura, to you, and have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashoka, also for welcoming me.
Thank you, Laura. We're glad to have you. Bye all.